In this video, I'm going to go over the Science 9 PAT from 2017. So I've broken down the video into different units. This one is all about biodiversity. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So we're looking here at question number 1, and it's asking you to do a couple of things. So they're talking about the geese. And so one thing I should mention is the Science PAT does like to give you all a little bit of extra reading. So just make sure you're very careful in what it's asking you before you attempt to answer the question. So we've got some facts about Canada geese, and we can see them listed right here. I'll give you a second to read those. Okay, so now what's important about this one is looking at the two terminology pieces of the ecological niche, okay? So when we're thinking of ecology or ecological, we're thinking about how different systems and populations work together in like a community, right? So we're not just thinking of one single organism, it's their impact on all the organisms together and their environment. When we're thinking of a niche, we're thinking of the role that the organism plays in that environment. So in this case, when we're thinking about ecological niche, we're thinking of the role that the organism is playing, but in respects to their environment. Meaning it's not just gonna affect them anymore, it's gonna also affect their environment. So let's see which of these is gonna fit that idea. So the last statement here says that they were believed to be extinct in the 1950s. Well, if they're extinct, that's gonna mean they don't actually have any ecological niche. So it's not going to be that one. They have well-developed vocal cords for communication. Well, that means they can interact with one another, but again, it's not really going to be filling a role inside the ecosystem. So that's not going to work. They fly in a V formation. Again, that's only suiting them, not the rest of the community. They play an important role in seed dispersal. Okay, so with seeds, my assumption is they're going to be probably consuming some of the seeds, but the dispersion is the key important fact here. If they're dispersing seeds, that means the seeds get a chance to live in a new environment and also get a chance to be to have their reproductive success, to live in a new role, in a new environment that they may not have been able to live in without the geese. So it's very similar to like bees populating flowers. So that one definitely is going to fit the role of an ecological niche. Okay, question number 2. So what's happening here we can see is we are applying insecticide over a period of time. And as we continue to apply the insecticide, the bugs that are able to survive slowly continues to increase. And that's represented by this number here, by that dark arrow. So as we keep going, the number of organisms that are resistant to the pesticide starts to increase. And that's how pesticide resistance and other types of resistances do actually happen. So what we need to do is to pick a graph that's going to best represent this information here. So this is really testing your skills and ability on graphing in science. So we've got 2 things to consider here. The first is the resistant individuals. Those are the organisms that over time are not able to be susceptible to the insecticide, meaning they're not passing on once the insect repellent is sprayed on, or the pesticide. And then these are the susceptible individuals, meaning they're the ones that actually are able to pass on from the insect repellent. So we need to decide which one is going to represent this graph here. So the first thing I notice is as my application continues, so 1, 2, 3, 4, the number of individuals that are resistant to the insecticide increases. Okay, so that means I'm looking for a solid line that's going to increase. Okay, so we're doing 2 things here. We have to pay attention to the information at the top and then go back down to that key that they gave us, or the legend. All right, well, I'm looking at this and there's only 2 graphs that are really showing me an increase in the resistant individuals. That's gonna be graph, I'm just gonna cross that off, graph A and graph D. So that narrows down my options. Now I've got 2 more options to pick from. And in graph A, my susceptible individuals, the number of susceptible individuals, they're decreasing over time. And in graph D, they're still decreasing, but they get to 0 by application 4. So I don't know about you, but when I'm looking at that information above, I didn't see anything that gets up to 0 by application 4. So what that means is our correct answer for this one is going to be option A. And this one here, even though it looks correct, it's not. I also did want to mention, just for this brief time in June while you all are studying for your finals, I did pop in a whole review booklet. What it is they're concept cards. So I've got all the terminology listed for the biodiversity unit, and you can fill in the aspects of the concepts that you might need to refresh yourself on. And then what I would do to help study is to take the concept cards, whether you cut them out or not, you can do it digitally if you like, is to kind of play around with them and figure out as many connections as well as differences as you can between the concepts. That's really going to help you understand all the learning within this unit. Okay, question number 1 for our numerical response. So we need to make sure we understand the differences between variations, both within a species and between species. So if you remember, variation is the subtle changes within an organism or between organisms, okay? So a simple example of that is all of you in your class, unless if there's identical twins in your class, all of you have different variations, whether it's different color hair, different eye colors, whatever it is. We're all of the human race, but we have variations within us. The other option is the variation between species. So that is like the difference between a human and their pets, right? They're going to be different. So what we need to do in these statements is decide which of the following statements are variation within a species. So looking at the same species and their differences, or between two different species, okay? So let's go through and decide that first. And in fact, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna ignore the numerical response boxes. Let's just go ahead and decide which statement is which, and then we can apply them. So, statement W, sharks exchange gases using gills, while whales exchange gases using lungs. Well, that one is definitely going to be between species. We're looking at two different species. We're looking at a whale and we're looking at a shark. So this one is between. Okay. The next statement. Some houseplants such as ferns use spores to reproduce, while other houseplants like ivies use runners. Again, we're talking about ferns and ivies. While they're both plants, they're still different species, right? If they were the same species, they would have the same name. So this one is between. Okay, here's our third statement. Black bears have fur colors ranging from blonde to brown to black. Okay, I don't hear a mention of another species, so this one will be within. All right, our last statement. The black veins on a male's monarch butterfly wings are thicker than the veins on a female monarch butterfly wings. So we're comparing the veins on wings between a monarch butterfly and a monarch butterfly. While they're two different genders, it's still the same species. So that's going to be within. Okay, so now what we need to do is decide if they're within the species, they're going to get a 1. And if they're between species, they're going to get a 2. So what I'm going to do here, and remember on your PAT, you get to write all over it. So do exactly what I'm doing, annotate on it, and make sure all the information is relevant to you. So within is going to get a 1. So that means this is 1, this is 1. And the other two, W and X, they are going to be between. So 2 and 2. And now I can just pop those numbers here, or what you're going to do is pop the numbers on your Scantron. But the numbers are going to be 2, 2, 1, and 1. Okay, question 3. So we've got a budding hydra. So if you're not sure what that means, it looks like a plant growing, but then we do have to come back to our key concept of what budding is. So budding is a type of reproduction. That means our organism is making another offspring of itself. The difference with budding versus other types of reproduction is this one is going to make an exact copy of it. So this parent hydra is no different genetically than the bud. It's just smaller, right? So it's like a clone of the species, which we know some plants and other organisms can do that. And then we have to decide if the offspring will be genetically identical to the parent. So let's see what's going on here. So first thing is we're making a copy. For this one, budding is an asexual type of reproduction. So that means I can cross off A and B right away. There's no mixing of genetic information here. It's the same genetic information. And that means if it's the same genetic information, they are going to be identical. It's not going to be different. So the answer for this one is going to be C. Okay, question number 4 here. So this again with biodiversity, with really all of biology, you want to make sure you know your terms and your concepts well. So they want to know which of the following options there are going to exhibit continuous variation. So you have to be clear about what that word means. So continuous, I'm thinking of something on a continuum. There's multiple options. The opposite of that is discrete variation. So with discrete variation, you either have the trait or you don't. So for example, with discrete variation, my thumb can go backwards like this and other people's can go straight. That's really it. You don't have anything in between, right? It's either going to be a straight thumb or a curved thumb. That's discrete. It's either one option or the other. Continuous, you have multiple options. So let's try and see which one of these has multiple options. Okay, I'm just going to go backwards, right to left. So the thumb example I just gave you, that's going to be discrete variation. It's not going to fit with what the question is asking. A widow's peak, that's where the hairline kind of makes a little point here. Again, you either have a widow's peak or in my case, like you don't. So that's going to be discrete. Scarring. Okay, scarring can be on a continuum, but let's double check our question. It's asking about heritable traits. So if you are, a heritable trait means it has to be passed on from parent to offspring. So last time I checked, we can't get our parent scars. So that one doesn't apply to the question. And then lastly, we're left with height. So height is definitely going to be continuous variation because you can have different variations of heights, right? They're not all just going to be this whole number. They're going to be point something. Some of you all might have done this in your classroom where you all lined up and you looked at continuous variation in terms of height. So for this one, it is going to be 4A. Okay, number 5. So with number 5, we are looking at the process of mitosis and meiosis, fertilization, and I think that's it. So just those 3. So I'm not going to look at the options right now. I want us to focus in on just that statement above. So we've got the adults, and the adults going through something to produce the sex cells or the gametes. Those gametes go through a process to create a zygote. So a zygote is just like a little, I don't want to say a baby because it might not be human, but like a little baby. And then that's going to produce an embryo, which is like a larger version of the zygote. More structures are defined. So if we're going from the adult to making gametes, well, that's going to be, there's only one way we can make those cells, and that's going to be through meiosis. Cross off option A and option B altogether. This one has to be meiosis. Okay, now we've got process 2. We've got the sex cells coming together to make a zygote. So anytime you've got a zygote or an offspring being produced, that's going to be fertilization. So that means it's not going to be option D. And let's verify that last option. We're going from a zygote to an embryo. So like I said, that's like a small cellular level as the zygote, going to the embryo, which is the larger level. So that's just growing, right? It's going from one small version to a large version. You're creating more cells. That is going to be mitosis. So the answer for number 5 is going to be C. Number 6. So I'm going to read the information out and then we'll talk about it. Sam would like to increase the volume of milk produced by the cows at her farm. The 10 highest milk-producing cows from her herd are chosen to produce the next generation of cows. And this is honestly what they do for milk production. They actually do this all the time. So we got to decide which is the process that's happening here. So asexual reproduction, we talked about it with the hydra and the budding. That one's not this. We're not producing a genetically identical cow. We're not cloning the cow. We're just picking and choosing what the parents are going to be. Genetic engineering, that is not this one. Genetic engineering involves a little bit more technology. Okay, so now we're left between C and D, artificial and natural selection. So natural selection is the ability of the environment to choose the offspring, or also sometimes the actual animal to choose their mate in order to reproduce. So that means this one is going to be artificial selection. Artificial selection means it's humans that are doing the picking and choosing to create the offspring. And we do this with farm animals, we also do it with plants, and we produce the yield that is the most desirable to us. So this one is going to be C here. Okay, so I'm just gonna quickly go over number 7. Sorry, we lost the footage. But what I'm gonna do is on the top of the screen, list out these 4 definitions here, okay? So make sure you understand those definitions first. So I'll give you guys a second to look at it. All right, so now let's look at the question here. So in 1995, wolves that were captured in Canada were reintroduced to Yellowstone National Park, United States, in an attempt to reestablish the predator-prey balance in the ecosystem. Before 1995, wolves had been absent from the park for almost 70 years. So that's going to be our key piece of information, right? Is that they were absent for a while and they were now reintroduced. So if we're thinking about our definitions, when we think about the statement that was made, they want to know, the question wants us to know about where in our options where that would be classified before 1995. So it's not going to be extinct, and the reason for that is because the wolves are still present. Extinct means we don't have any trace of them anymore. The wolves are still present. Option B is definitely an option. We can see that they were re-established, meaning that they first were gone and then now we're trying to basically get things back to normal. But the other thing that's also of interest to me is the predator-prey balance. That means there must be some population overgrowth of a certain organism that the wolves are now going to control. So the wolves are going to keep down the population of whatever organism needs to be controlled. So that means it actually can't be C, because if they were threatened, that would mean another predator is consuming them, and that's not the case there based on this information here. All right, our last one is endangered. Based on this information here, there is really not much that says that it's endangered here, so our option is going to be option B. Okay, number 8. Which of the following statements describe the abundance of species in different regions on Earth? So one of the things that I just want to make clear, in case you might have forgotten it, is that the majority of species, when we're talking about abundance, it's going to be around that equator. And let's think about that. When we're thinking about our organisms that are in that area, whether it's a plant or an animal, there's a lot of them. Lots of big, luscious trees, lots of colorful birds, colorful animals, a lot of them are hanging out there. On the contrast, if we think about where we are from, so in Canada, yes, we have diverse species, but they're not as colorful, they're not as vibrant. They have to do things in order to really adapt to our winter. So for example, our bears have to hibernate in the winter. So that means the diversity is going to be a little bit different here, as opposed to a place on the equator where they have consistent temperatures and they have consistent weather. So let's think about that for a second. So we want to know which one would have the most abundance. So like I just said, it's going to be closer to the equator. So anything that doesn't fit the equator statement, we can cross off right away. So A is a good option, B is not. Yeah, B would not be an option. C would also not be an option. They're talking about species that are away from the equator. And the other extreme of this too would be thinking of organisms in the equator, in our tropical regions versus like our colder areas, right? So you're not gonna have the same amount of diversity. So that leaves us with option A and D. With D, we're looking at the abundance of species, and the greatest diversity on Earth is found near the equator. Okay, that one sounds really good to me. With 8, we're looking at it's near the equator, but it's found in regions furthest from the equator. That's not true. So that leaves us with option D. Okay, number 9 here. So a couple of things that we're noticing with this one. So we've got an experiment where the girls won a prize at the science fair, and they're studying the effects of treating barley seeds in different solutions before planting them. And then we've got their findings right here. So what we need to do based on the question is find the manipulated variable. So what does it mean to be manipulated? If we think about what that means, it means to change someone's mind or someone's thinking. So in this case, when it comes to science, this is the variable that we are changing. It's the aspect of the experiment that is changing.
Okay, so let's see what we're changing. So we've got our water control group and our water and bacteria, water control group and water and bacteria. Okay. The time it takes for the plants to germinate, well, we probably want that to be this, we probably will measure the same amount of time. That is going to be the difference in this experiment, meaning it's going to be what the responding variable is, but it's not what's changing. It's not what we are changing in the experiment. It's not what we are testing. The different solutions for treatments of the seeds. Okay, that one does seem really good to me because we are treating it with water and bacteria, and we're comparing it to just the water-treated control group. That one looks pretty promising. Option C, the type of soil used to plant the seeds. I don't see anywhere talking about the soil that was changed. I don't see that anywhere, so that's not going to be an option. And option D, dry mass of the plants after 37 days of growth. So that to me is something that we're recording, but it's not something that we're changing for the experiment. So in this case, our option, or our answer, excuse me, is going to be answer B.
Okay, last one here. Sorry, technical difficulties. So we're still looking at the same graph with the girls at the science fair, but what we need to do is compare the controlled group with the bacteria seeded treat. So let me read that out loud to make sure that makes sense. Compared to the control group seeds, the water and bacteria treated seeds produce. So all of these options are in reference to the water and bacteria seeds that produced the plant. So I already have option A crossed off because if we look at our graph, actually let's analyze our graph first. The water control group took some time to germinate in comparison to the one with bacteria. In addition, the water control group produced our product, the dry mass of it, but the water and bacteria produce way more. All right, so now that that's straight in our brain, let's take a look at what's happening here. So truthfully, A and B we can cross off right away because they weren't slow germinating. They germinated in half the time in comparison to that water treated group. So we know for sure they're faster germinating. Then we just have to see which one produced more crops. Well, like I said earlier, this one here, the water bacteria, that produced a lot more crops than the water treated one. So our answer for this one has to be C. Okay, that is it for me for the end of this unit. Keep an eye out for the next parts to come out for the rest of the PAT. As always, if you need any help whatsoever, make sure to give me a shout so I can help you pass these exams. Good luck studying, and I will see you all in the next one.